Hello everyone, this is Alex with the Sachem Public Library Studio, and today we will be talking about how to create a heart box with Tinkercad. The first thing you're going to want to do is go into tinkercad.com, and then you're going to want to sign in, or if you have not used Tinkercad before, you're going to want to create an account. You can sign in with your regular email address, you can sign into Tinkercad with a social media account such as Gmail or Facebook or others. Once you have created your account or signed in, you will see a screen similar to mine. If you've used Tinkercad before, you will have your own designs here. If you have not, this area will be blank. So for today, what we're going to want to do is click Create a New Design. Now that we're in here, I'm going to give a basic overview of the interface. So over on the left here, we have different zooms and view functions. So this will revert home. So if you happen to zoom in and you click the home button, it will bring you back to this view here. The view below that is fit your selection in view. So if you have an object selected and you click this, it will bring you to that object so you can examine it better or move around it more efficiently. The plus button will zoom in. The minus button will zoom out. You can also use your scroll wheel or a touchpad zoom if you are using one of those. Or you can switch to a flat view, which I don't recommend for this. Over here on the right, we have our shape view. So we have our shape selection tab here, so we can choose between basic shapes, text and numbers, and other things. Up on the top right, we have our import and export options. So this will allow us to bring an existing 3D model into Tinkercad to work on it. The export will allow us to export our design, either the entire design or specific shapes, in one of these file formats here. Up in the top left, we have copy, paste, and a duplicate and repeat function, as well as a garbage can for delete. You can also use your delete key to do the same thing. And then over here is undo and redo. Up in the top left over here, we have the name of our object, which when you create a new design is randomly generated. So here we're going to call this heart box for now. Now that we have our design named, what we're going to start working on is our actual box. Before we get into that though, what we're going to do is we're going to go over down at the bottom right here, our grid. If you click on Edit Grid, you will see our grid properties here. Some of you may not be comfortable working in millimeters. You might understand inches better. So you can click on inches and you can hit Update Grid. And now your snap grid size will be what you have set here. So it will be in inches. So 1/8 of an inch means that if you have a box placed here, every time you move it, it will move one box or one space on the grid, and each space is equivalent to the snap grid size at 1/8 of an inch. If we make this smaller, 1/64, now it will move much slower and it will move in smaller increments. If we make it 1/2 of an inch, now it will move in much larger increments. So you can set that to whatever you'd like it to be, whatever that option is easiest for you. You may find if you're trying to move something in a very specific place, or you're trying to center something inside of another object, which you'll see in a minute, it is easier to do that with a smaller snap grid size. So to make our heart box, we're going to need a heart. So we're going to scroll down a little bit here, and we will find a heart. Now we can drag our heart into our workspace here. So I'll place it right there. Now that we have our heart, what we can do is we can view how large the heart is by hovering over one of these white boxes here. So we can see it's 1.4 inches wide by 1.3 inches tall. So we can make this bigger if we wanted. So let's make this 3 by 2.9. Now we have our generic heart shape. You can make your box as big as small as you want. The one thing I will note though is the largest that we can print is around 8 inches by 8 inches. If your heart box happens to be larger than that, we can scale it down, but it might be easier to just start off by making your box smaller than that. So we're going to go with this size, and I do want to change the height. So this box here shows us how tall or how thick our part is. So I want it to be 0.75. And now what I want to do is I want to put a hole in it. That way we can actually put things inside of our box. So to do that, I'm going to make a copy. So I'm going to copy it, and then I'm going to paste it. So to do that, I'm using keyboard shortcuts for this. So now that I have a copy, what I want to do is I want to make the copy smaller than the outside because the hole needs to sit inside of our base shape. So our base shape is 3 inches by 2.9 inches. So I'm going to make this instead 2.5 inches by 2.4 inches. So now it will fit comfortably inside, and we have a decent sized rim all the way around. Now, if you'll notice, that's not perfectly centered. And if I try to move it around, it's not sitting where I want it. So I can change my snap grid size, and then I can move the shape until I'm happy with where it's sitting. Maybe I want it right there. That looks about centered to me. Now that I have that, I'm going to make it a little bit higher, and I'm going to turn it into a hole. This will allow us to cut out the two shapes. So if we group them by clicking the group button once they're both selected, it will cut out where the hole was outside of the solid. So if you notice here, the hole went all the way through, which is not what we want. If you click on an object, you could see how far down it goes into another object with this black dotted line here. That black dotted line is all the way down to the bottom, which means this is going to cut straight through our object, which is not what we want here. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to have to raise this a little bit above the bottom of our object. So maybe I want it about 1/8 of an inch above the floor, which means the thickness at the bottom of our shape here is going to be 1/8 of an inch. So now if I group these together, just like this, you'll see that I have that heart cut out inside of our other shape. So now we have a box. What we're going to need to do now is we're going to have to create a lid for this box. So to create the lid, we're going to use our existing shapes that we have here already. So I'm going to make a copy of our base. I'm going to line it up with our original shape. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it above the build plate, just like this. And I'm going to make it a little bit thinner than the base. So this was 3/4 of an inch tall. I want this maybe 1/4 of an inch. So now the total height that the box will be once it's closed is 1 inch thick. Now that I have that, this obviously won't work here if I just group this like this. I can put that lid on there, but it won't stay on. There's nothing holding it. So in order to do that, what we're going to do is we're actually going to make a copy of the hole inside of the box, and we're going to line those two holes up together. So we're going to get a better view of that, and we're going to move the hole around until it's perfectly aligned. So right there. And now once it's aligned, I'm going to move the hole up into our shape here. Okay, now that I have the hole here, I'm going to make the hole way smaller. And I'm going to move it up into the base of our lid, just like this. Now that it's there, and I want to make sure that they're touching so they actually combine into one shape, I want to turn it back into a solid. And you can see here if I drop it down a little bit more, it won't be touching. And you can see that if you move your camera angle right at the right angle, you can make sure that it's going to be touching the other object. Now, what happens if we group the base two and the top two for the lid is we end up with two separate shapes, one lid and one base, that if we were to take the lid and drop it downward, fits perfectly right on top of our other shape. And it will close and stay closed because we have that piece in the lid that is sticking out. Now this lip isn't very thick, so it won't obstruct anything that you're putting in here. One thing to consider while building this is what you're going to be putting in the box. So if you want something that's thicker than about between 1/2 and 3/4 of an inch to fit in here, make sure this hole in the base will fit between the bottom of the hole and the base of the lid once it's closed. Otherwise, you won't be able to shut it. If you're not sure, you can always overestimate and make the hole a bit bigger than you need. That way you know that there's going to be plenty of room. Once you have these shapes set up, what we're going to do now is you can customize it a little bit. So we're going to put this down on the build platform. So I'm going to make the height here 0. That will place it so it's touching. And now you can add a little bit of personal flair. So you can add a letter if you'd like on the top of your heart box. So if you drag a letter in or any other object, it's going to by default drag and drop onto the build plate itself. So it's not going to drop on top of other objects. It's just going to be touching the work plane. So I want to move it above the work plane here. And now I can see it on top of my lid. Now that it's here, what I can do is I can place it where I want it on the lid. I can make it larger if I want to make it bigger by dragging it out or by changing the numbers. Once I'm happy with where it's positioned, I can group them together. I can make it a bit higher or thicker or thinner by adjusting the height of the E. That looks about good to me. So once you're happy with the positioning of your personalizations, you can again group them together. And now that E will be printed along with the rest of the lid. One other thing to note here before printing is that the color that you're working in here, I'm working in brown for instance, has no impact on the color of your print once you're finished. In order to select your print color, what you're going to need to do is you're going to send us the files. So you're going to send the files to studio, studio, at sachemlibrary.org. In that email, you're going to include the files for the bottom and the top of your heart box, which I'll explain how to get in a minute. You're going to include your name and your library card number. That way we can make sure you're registered for this class. And then you're going to tell us what color you want the heart box to be printed in. That's how we'll determine your color. We will just print the shape that you send us in the color that you tell us. So the color in here of your heart box does not affect anything for the final print. So these can be whatever you'd like them to be in. They're just for organization and keeping things separate. Now that I have my 2 files made, what I want to do is export them. So in order to do that, I can click the export button, but I want to make sure they have different names. That way I know what they are. So I'm going to type in here, I'm going to add the word top. So I'm going to call it Heartbox Top. And now when I click export, it will ask me, do I want to export everything or the selected shape? You're going to keep the selected shape, and then you're going to hit STL because that's what we at the studio will be using to print. And your computer will get that download. And now we have the top downloaded. And then we're just going to do the same thing for the bottom here. So I'm going to rename this to Heartbox Bottom. I'm going to click on the bottom, make sure it's highlighted. And then I'm going to hit export. And again, choose STL. And now I have my 2 files. So once you have your 2 files, you're going to, again, send us an email at studio@sachemlibrary.org. And you're going to attach these 2 files here. And you're going to tell us your name, your barcode, and the color that you want them printed in. Once we've printed them for you, we will give you a call or an email and let you know that they are ready for pickup. I hope that this tutorial helped you today, and have fun making your heart boxes. Have a great day.